You know that moment when someone who's always pushed people away suddenly realizes they might have pushed the wrong person. It's not a loud realization, it's quiet. It happens late at night, when the messages stop coming, when the silence starts to feel heavier than the space they once protected. Avoidants often think distance is safety, that if they pull back, they'll avoid getting hurt. But one day they realize that in protecting themselves, they've been slowly losing the people who cared the most. When someone avoids love, conflict, or vulnerability, it's not because they don't feel. It's because they feel too much. They're afraid that opening up will make them lose control. But love doesn't need control, it needs courage. The courage to say, I miss you. The courage to admit, I was wrong. The courage to realize I built walls when I needed bridges. And when that realization hits, when they finally see the cost of emotional distance, something changes. They start replaying moments, the times you tried to understand them, the times they shut you out, the moments they saw disappointment in your eyes but stayed silent. It's in those flashbacks that regret grows. Because avoidants don't usually understand the damage until the connection is gone. Then suddenly, they crave the very closeness they once ran from. Here's the truth: realizing you're wrong isn't weakness. It's maturity. It's the first sign of growth. When someone avoids love, they convince themselves that independence is power, but real power is being strong and open. It's knowing that saying, I need you, doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. If you've been on the other side of this, if you loved someone who ran when things got real, remember this. Their silence wasn't a reflection of your worth. Their distance wasn't your failure. Some people need to lose something real to understand what love truly feels like. And if you're the avoidant, this is your moment. Don't wait for silence to teach you what connection could have shown you. The bravest thing you can do isn't walking away, it's staying. It's showing up. It's saying, I'm sorry, and meaning it. Because the moment an avoidant realizes they're wrong is the moment they finally understand that love was never the threat, it was always the answer. Realization doesn't always arrive with thunder or dramatic apologies. More often, it enters quietly, like a whisper in the night that someone can no longer ignore. For the avoidant, that whisper becomes a turning point, the slow and painful recognition that pushing people away has come at a cost. It usually happens when the silence grows louder than the comfort they once found in solitude. The very space they believed would protect them begins to feel empty. They notice the absence: no more good morning texts, no more check-ins, no more presence of the person who once waited patiently for them to open up. That's when the truth starts to sink in. The wall they built to stay safe became the barrier that kept love out. Avoidants are not heartless, they're careful. They believe that closeness invites chaos, that vulnerability will only end in pain. So they retreat into silence, convincing themselves that distance is peace. But when the calls stop coming, when no one reaches out anymore, peace turns to loneliness. They begin replaying moments in their mind, the times someone reached for them, and they turned away, the times they were asked, what's wrong? And they said, nothing. Slowly, they start to see how every moment of withdrawal was a small act of self-sabotage. They didn't mean to hurt anyone, but fear made them believe safety was found in isolation. Now, with time and space, they realize that safety without connection is just emptiness dressed in calm. The most striking thing about realization is that it's internal. It doesn't need confrontation or lectures. It's born from the stillness of reflection. An avoidant may wake up one day and feel a pang of sadness they can't name. They might scroll through old messages or glance at a photo that once made them smile. In that quiet ache, they recognize the pattern not because someone told them, but because they finally feel the weight of what they pushed away. It's not anger or guilt that moves them, it's awareness. Awareness that love wasn't the threat they thought it was. Awareness that they mistook control for protection. For many avoidants, this realization is the first true glimpse of emotional maturity. It's humbling to see how much they resisted the very thing they needed: connection, understanding, and acceptance. The silence they once found comforting now reminds them of all the laughter and warmth they no longer have. It's not dramatic, it's deeply human. Growth often begins not with fireworks, but with quiet regret. That soft, steady awareness becomes the foundation for change. They begin to understand that love isn't about losing independence, it's about sharing life without losing oneself. And in that understanding, they realize that the walls they built to protect themselves were never worth the loneliness that came with them. Many people who avoid emotional closeness believe that distance is a form of strength. They think pulling away is how they stay in control, how they protect their heart from disappointment, rejection, or loss. To the avoidant, space feels like safety. It gives them a sense of power, as if by keeping emotions at arm's length, they can decide when and how to feel. But what they don't realize is that emotional distance doesn't build strength. It builds walls. And over time, those walls become prisons, silent, comfortable, and lonely. When someone constantly withdraws, they start to live in a world where they only trust themselves. They stop reaching out, stop relying on anyone, stop sharing their truth. To them, vulnerability becomes a weakness, something to be ashamed of. But true strength isn't about never needing anyone, it's about being brave enough to let people see you, flaws and all. When we push others away to avoid pain, we also shut out the joy, support, and warmth that come with real connection. Avoidants don't mean to be cold, they simply fear being hurt. But the irony is that in avoiding pain, they end up creating it not just for others, but for themselves. Over time, the illusion of safety begins to crack. The comfort of distance slowly turns to isolation. The avoidant may start to notice that even though no one can hurt them, no one can reach them either. The peace they once prized starts to feel hollow. They look around and realize that the people who once cared have stopped trying. The texts are unanswered, the calls go quiet, and suddenly they're surrounded by the silence they created. That's when the truth hits that strength built on avoidance is fragile. It keeps the world out, but it also keeps love away. Real strength lies in the courage to stay present when things get uncomfortable. It's in saying, "I'm scared," instead of running. It's in trusting that connection won't destroy you, but teach you to love, to forgive, to be seen. These are acts of strength that require far more bravery than silence ever will. Distance might feel like control, but control isn't the same as peace. Peace comes from facing fear, not fleeing from it. The moment an avoidant realizes that pulling away didn't protect them, but only deepened their loneliness, they begin to see vulnerability in a new light. They understand that emotional closeness doesn't make them weak, it makes them whole. True resilience isn't about avoiding hurt, it's about learning to open your heart again, even after you've been hurt. The greatest lesson is this: walls may keep danger out, but they also keep love from ever finding its way in. Vulnerability is often misunderstood as a sign of weakness, especially by those who fear being hurt or rejected. For someone with avoidant tendencies, opening up feels like surrender, like giving someone else the power to wound them. They believe that staying guarded is safer, that silence and control are shields against disappointment. But over time, they discover that the walls built to protect the heart also keep out love, compassion, and understanding. It takes incredible courage to lower those defenses, to say, "I was wrong," or "I'm sorry." That moment of honesty, however uncomfortable, is not weakness, it's strength in its purest form. Growth begins when a person realizes that avoiding emotions doesn't make them strong, it only delays healing. Facing feelings, shame, guilt, regret requires bravery. When someone admits they've made mistakes or hurt others by staying distant, they are stepping into a deeper kind of power. It's the power of accountability, the courage to be seen, and the strength to reconnect. Vulnerability is not about spilling every emotion or confessing every thought. It's about allowing yourself to be human, to be imperfect, and to care openly without fear of losing yourself. For the avoidant, this shift is life-changing. They start to recognize that saying, "I need you" or "I miss you" doesn't make them dependent, it makes them real. Real relationships thrive on truth, and truth requires openness. When a person hides behind emotional armor, no one truly knows them. They might feel safe, but they're also unseen. It's only when they begin to share their fears, hopes, and insecurities that genuine connection becomes possible. Admitting vulnerability doesn't diminish their worth, it enhances it. It tells the world, "I trust myself enough to be honest." This kind of openness is transformative. It allows others to step closer, to feel trusted, and to trust in return. Every apology becomes a bridge. Every honest word becomes an act of healing. And while it may feel uncomfortable, discomfort is often the birthplace of growth. The person who once ran from emotions starts to see that the moments they feared rejection, judgment, disappointment are far less painful than a lifetime of emotional distance. Being vulnerable also teaches empathy. When you've faced your own fears and regrets, you become more patient with others. You begin to understand that everyone is fighting silent battles, and that love isn't about perfection, it's about presence. To admit "I was wrong" is to invite understanding. To say "I'm sorry" is to choose connection over ego. That choice is not easy, but it's the foundation of every meaningful bond. In the end, vulnerability becomes the doorway to real strength, not the kind that hides behind walls, but the kind that stands tall in truth and dares to love despite the risk. Love is not something that can survive in absence or avoidance. It needs presence to breathe. For someone with avoidant tendencies, being present often feels overwhelming. They crave connection but fear being consumed by it. They want love, but only on their terms in doses they can control. Yet the truth is, love cannot be experienced from a distance. You cannot feel warmth if you never step close to the fire. Real love requires showing up not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. It demands that you bring your full self into the relationship, not a guarded version that only allows others to see what feels safe. Avoidants often confuse independence with strength, believing that needing someone makes them weak or dependent. They think that keeping emotions contained and maintaining distance protects their sense of control. But love is not about control, it's about connection. Independence is important, but it should not come at the cost of intimacy. You can be strong and still allow someone to stand beside you. You can be independent and still share your heart. True strength lies not in isolation, but in interdependence, in knowing that while you can stand alone, life is richer when shared with someone who understands you. Presence means more than being in the same room. It means being emotionally available. It's listening, engaging, and caring without withdrawing when things get uncomfortable. When you choose to be present, you're saying, "I'm here not just when it's easy, but when it's hard." For avoidance, that's a powerful step. It means resisting the urge to retreat at the first sign of conflict. It means sitting in discomfort and realizing that love can survive it. Avoidance may feel safe in the short term, but it robs you of the deep connection that only vulnerability can bring. When a person learns to stay instead of escape, something profound happens. Trust begins to grow. Not just trust from their partner, but trust within themselves. They start to see that they can face emotional storms and still remain whole. They discover that love doesn't take away their identity, it helps it evolve. Each moment of presence becomes a small act of courage, a step toward a deeper, more authentic relationship. Love flourishes in honesty and consistency. When you're truly present, you build a bond that feels real and safe. It's not about perfection or constant harmony. It's about commitment to understanding and being understood. The avoidant who once feared closeness learns that presence is not a trap, but a doorway, one that leads to fulfillment, peace, and belonging. By showing up with openness instead of retreating in fear, they find that love is not something to be controlled, but something to be experienced fully, bravely, and completely. Regret is one of life's most powerful teachers. It doesn't shout, it lingers quietly, reminding you of moments when you could have chosen differently. For the avoidant, regret often arrives after silence when they finally realize that in protecting themselves, they pushed away the very people who cared. It's in the quiet after a relationship ends, in the stillness when there's no one left to call, that the weight of avoidance begins to feel heavy. They start to see that every time they pulled back, every time they refused to express what they felt, they were not protecting love, they were slowly suffocating it. Avoidants don't set out to cause pain. Their distance comes from fear of rejection, of loss, of being misunderstood. But when the person they kept at arm's length finally gives up, the avoidant is left with a painful realization. Silence doesn't save you from heartbreak, it simply delays it. Regret starts to grow when they recognize that love was trying to reach them, but they were too afraid to let it in. They begin to remember the small gestures, the patience, the care, the attempts to connect, and realize those were opportunities for closeness that they let slip away. The beauty of regret is that it holds a mirror to our patterns. It doesn't just remind us of what we lost, it teaches us why we lost it. It exposes the cost of emotional distance and reveals how self-protection can become self-sabotage. When the avoidant finally faces this truth, they start to understand that vulnerability, though risky, was always the path to something real. Regret forces them to confront the gap between what they wanted, love, peace, connection, and what they chose, distance, silence, control. That confrontation, though painful, becomes the seed of transformation. It's through regret that self-awareness is born. The avoidant begins to ask deeper questions. Why did I run? Why was I afraid to be seen? What was I really protecting? In seeking those answers, they begin to grow. They learn that love isn't something to be managed or minimized. It's something to be experienced. Regret shows them that emotions, even painful ones, are not enemies, they're teachers guiding them back to authenticity. And while regret can't change the past, it can shape the future. It can turn avoidance into accountability and fear into understanding. The pain of realizing what's lost can inspire someone to do better, to show up differently next time. Every mistake becomes a message. Love is fragile, but it's also forgiving. What matters most is not that we avoided pain, but that we learned to face it with honesty. In that lesson, regret transforms from punishment into purpose, a quiet reminder that the heart's true strength lies not in avoiding love, but in daring to embrace it fully, even after we've been wrong. In the end, every wall we build to protect ourselves eventually teaches us that love was never the danger fear was. Real growth begins the moment we stop running, admit our mistakes, and choose connection over control. When we find the courage to face our patterns, we discover that vulnerability isn't weakness, but the path to real strength, healing, and peace. So if you've ever been avoidant or loved someone who was, let this be a reminder it's never too late to show up, to speak your truth, and to love bravely. Thank you for listening, for reflecting, and for choosing growth over comfort, because that choice changes everything.